Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled, where we break down the news of the future for you. Imagine if the secret to living longer, healthier lives was hiding in one of nature's strangest creatures, a rodent that lives 10 times longer than it should. A creature that doesn't get cancer, that doesn't develop Alzheimer's, that seems to have cracked the code of aging itself. Well, that creature exists, and scientists have just figured out how to steal its genetic secrets. Over the past few years, something remarkable has been happening in labs around the world. Researchers have discovered that you can take a longevity gene from a naked mole rat, transfer it to a mouse, and actually extend that mouse's lifespan. They've found similar aging-defying mechanisms in bowhead whales that live for 2 centuries. They're mapping the genetic architecture of human centenarians, and they're developing entirely new ways to measure your biological age, not in years, but in how your cells are actually aging. But here's what's really wild. This isn't just academic curiosity anymore. We're talking about billions of dollars in investment. New drug pipelines. A fundamental shift in how medicine views aging itself, from an inevitable fact of life to a disease that can actually be treated. Today, we're going to connect all the dots. We're going to explore how extreme longevity works in nature, how scientists are transferring those mechanisms across species, how we're learning to measure biological age with remarkable precision, and what all of this means for your future and possibly your lifespan. Let's dive in. What if I told you there's a creature that's basically immune to aging? That's the naked mole rat. And it's not science fiction, it's real. Naked mole rats are small wrinkled rodents that live underground in the deserts of East Africa. They're eusocial, like ants or bees, meaning they live in colonies with a queen who breeds and workers who serve the colony. And they're absolutely bizarre when it comes to aging. A normal mouse lives about 3 years. A naked mole rat? 41 years. That's not a 10% difference. That's a tenfold difference. A mouse-sized creature that lives as long as a human. And here's the kicker. While that mouse would be showing serious signs of age after 2 years, the naked mole rat at 15 years old looks and acts almost identical to a naked mole rat at 5 years old. They don't get cancer, not really. Scientists have studied thousands of these animals and found virtually no spontaneous tumors. They don't develop Alzheimer's disease, even though their brains contain the exact proteins, amyloid beta and tau, that cause dementia in humans. They don't get cardiovascular disease. Their hearts show almost no signs of aging, even at 40 years old. Their muscles stay strong. Their bones don't degrade. Their immune systems don't decline. It's as if they've somehow paused the aging process entirely. Now, the really important part. They're not doing this with some alien biology. 88% of their genes are orthologous to human genes, meaning they're basically the same genes we have. The difference is in how those genes are expressed, how they're regulated, and what proteins they produce. Scientists have been studying these animals for decades, trying to understand the mechanism, and they've found some genuinely extraordinary things. Naked mole rats have much higher levels of high molecular weight hyaluronic acid, HMWHA for short, a substance that seems to protect their cells from damage and regulate their immune systems. They have enhanced DNA repair mechanisms. Their cells turn over proteins more slowly and carefully, reducing the accumulation of damaged proteins. Their metabolism is lower and more efficient. And they seem to tolerate oxidative stress in ways that completely contradict everything we thought we knew about aging. But the breakthrough, the thing that changed everything, came when researchers asked a simple question. What if we could give this gene to another animal? In 2023, researchers at the University of Rochester published a study that sent shockwaves through the aging research community. They took the naked mole rat gene responsible for producing HMWHA and inserted it into mice. Just that one gene. Nothing else. The results were dramatic. The mice with the naked mole rat gene lived about 4.5% longer than regular mice. That might not sound like much, but consider this. If that same percentage applied to humans, it would be roughly 3 extra years of life. And that's just from one gene, one protein. Imagine what happens when you start stacking multiple longevity mechanisms. But the lifespan extension was almost secondary to what else they found. These mice had better protection against both spontaneous tumors and induced skin cancer. They showed less inflammation as they aged. And remember, inflammation is one of the hallmark signatures of aging. Their gut health was better. Their overall health markers were improved. They were, in essence, aging more slowly. This is where things get really interesting, because this wasn't just proof that you could transfer a gene. It was proof that you could transfer a mechanism, a biological strategy for staying young, from one species to another, across millions of years of evolutionary distance. Now, how did they actually do it? The researchers used something called gene therapy. Specifically, they used modified viruses, engineered versions that have had their dangerous genes removed, but kept their ability to deliver genetic material into cells. These are called AAV vectors, or adeno-associated viruses. They're like biological delivery trucks. You load them up with the gene you want to transfer, and they drive it right into the target cells. The naked mole rat HS2 gene, that's the gene that codes for the protein that makes HMWA, was packaged into these viral vectors and delivered to the mice. And it worked. The mice's bodies started producing the same version of this protein that naked mole rats make. And suddenly they had some of the same longevity benefits. This opened up a massive question. If it works for this gene, what about others? What if you could layer multiple longevity mechanisms? What if you could take genes from different long-lived species and combine them? But before we go down that road, we need to talk about another creature that's been giving scientists equally fascinating clues about extreme longevity. Let me ask you something. How old are you? I mean, really. Your birthday tells you how many years you've been alive, but your cells, your organs, your immune system, they might be aging much faster or much slower than your chronological age suggests. For decades, scientists had no way to measure this. They could measure your chronological age. They could measure various health markers, cholesterol, blood pressure, glucose levels, but they couldn't measure your actual biological age, how fast your body is aging at the cellular level. Then, about a decade ago, researchers made a breakthrough. They discovered something called epigenetic aging clocks. Here's the basic idea. Your DNA doesn't change much over your lifetime. You're born with a certain genetic code, and that code stays mostly the same. But what changes is how your DNA is used. Which genes are turned on and which are turned off. This is controlled by a process called methylation, where chemical tags attach to your DNA and basically tell your cells whether to read a particular gene or ignore it. As you age, these methylation patterns change in predictable ways. Different genes get tagged, different genes get untagged, and researchers realized they could look at these patterns and predict someone's biological age with remarkable accuracy. This is wild. If you take a blood sample from a 30-year-old whose cells are aging quickly due to stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, or other factors, their epigenetic clock might say they're biologically 45. Meanwhile, a 60-year-old who exercises regularly, eats well, and manages stress might have the epigenetic age of a 50-year-old. These clocks have been refined and improved over the years. There's the Horvath clock, the Hannum clock, the pheno-age clock. Each one uses slightly different markers, but they're all measuring the same basic thing: the rate at which your cells are accumulating the changes associated with aging. And here's where it gets even more interesting. These clocks don't just measure aging. They can measure whether interventions are actually working. If you change your lifestyle, your epigenetic age can shift. If you take certain medications or supplements, your biological aging rate can change. This is crucial for longevity research, because now, instead of waiting 30 years to see if a drug extends lifespan, you can measure whether it's slowing biological aging in months. Recently, researchers did a large study called the Cosmos trial. They gave some older adults a daily multivitamin and others a placebo. After 2 years, they measured their epigenetic age, and they found something remarkable. The people taking the multivitamin had slowed their biological aging by about 2% per year, compared to the placebo group. That doesn't sound like much, but if you maintain that rate over a decade, you're essentially aging 2 years for every 10 years that pass. You're buying yourself extra time. Now, multivitamins aren't exactly cutting-edge medicine, but the fact that even something that simple can measurably slow biological aging tells you something important. Aging isn't inevitable. It's not hardwired. It's a process that can be influenced. And the more we understand the mechanisms, the DNA repair systems, the metabolic efficiency, the immune regulation, the more we can potentially intervene. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this exploration of longevity science, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss when we drop the next episode. It genuinely helps us out. Now, let's talk about what's actually driving all this research forward. Something extraordinary is happening right now in the world of venture capital and pharmaceutical research. Money is flooding into longevity science like never before. In 2024, investment in longevity companies more than doubled to $8.5 billion. $8.5 billion. That's not chump change. That's serious institutional money. It's Google Ventures. It's Amazon's Jeff Bezos. It's major pharmaceutical companies. It's hedge funds. Everyone is suddenly paying attention to aging. Why? Because people are starting to realize that aging is actually addressable, that it's not just an inevitable part of being human, that you can measure it, you can intervene in it, and you can potentially slow it down or even reverse it. This has spawned an entirely new field called Geroscience, the science of aging itself, and it's creating a new category of drugs called geroprotectors. These aren't drugs that treat specific diseases. They're drugs that target the fundamental mechanisms of aging, that try to slow or reverse biological aging itself. Some of these are based directly on what we've learned from long-lived animals. Companies are working on ways to enhance DNA repair, to reduce inflammation, to improve mitochondrial function, to activate autophagy, the cellular cleanup process that removes damaged proteins and organelles. There's also a major shift happening in how regulatory agencies like the FDA think about aging. For decades, aging wasn't classified as a disease. It was just what happens. But that's changing. There's increasing recognition that aging is actually a disease process, that it's the underlying cause of cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and virtually every major killer in the developed world. If you treat aging as a disease, if you target it directly, you don't just extend lifespan. You extend health span, the number of years you're actually healthy and functional. And that's really what people care about. Nobody wants to live to 120 if you spend the last 40 years in decline. So you've got this convergence, scientific breakthroughs showing that longevity mechanisms can be transferred between species and measured in real time. Massive investment from some of the world's richest people and institutions. New regulatory frameworks that recognize aging as a disease, and a pipeline of new drugs that are actually targeting the biology of aging. But there's still a massive gap between what we know in the lab and what we can do in the clinic. Gene therapy works in mice, but humans are vastly more complex. We have immune systems that might reject the viral vectors. We have ethical concerns about modifying human genes. We have the challenge of delivering these therapies to the right tissues in the right amounts. And there's still genuine scientific debate about which mechanisms are most important. Is it DNA repair? Is it metabolic efficiency? Is it inflammation control? Is it protein quality? The answer is probably all of the above, working together in an integrated system. But the momentum is undeniable. We're at an inflection point. The science is real. The investment is real. The tools are getting better every year, and for the first time in human history, we're actually building an infrastructure to make human longevity a medical reality rather than a fantasy.
Let the future be your guide with all the